here. And then you want to give your project a name. Actually, the problem with before was I didn't give it a name. So let's give it kind of week 2. Okay, guys. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm giving it the name week 2. I'm going to have to pick pure Python for now. I'm going to say new virtual environment, and I'm going to say create. Do you guys have any questions about this? Was that good? I mean, I'm going to show you what happens here, but was that clear how you create a new project? It was kind of straightforward, I think. Give me a reaction, guys. I need some reactions. I need to make sure that it's good. Okay. All right, that's good. So when you do that, this is what really opens. And there is this file called main.py, and you can get rid of everything here. I'm going to get rid of everything here. And let me look at the chat window. There's a question. Is anyone having a problem getting PyCharm to run? Okay, it just took a while to update. So guys, let me tell you something. You want to assume, or you want to pretend that we're in a class. And we have to be somewhat kind of organized. So for example, in a class, you don't kind of ask, other questions, other students questions like that, because it might kind of make the whole kind of, it might be distraction. So so I do want you to ask questions, but I do want you to be mindful of what you're asking. For example, a question that's the question that I'm reading here is anyone having a problem getting PyCharm? That's not a very good question to ask in a chat window, because then it'll create some chaos. Some students will say yes, some students will say no, and it'll be distracting. So now, John, if you can kind of send me a direct message, and maybe I'll comment, maybe I'll say let's do it later. But let's kind of be, I like the way what we're doing. We're organized. Every class is better than the one before. But we don't want to be very kind of chaotic. Okay, so chat is engaging, not distracting. Well, it can be distracting. I can make that kind of argument. I don't think we don't want to debate that now, but it can be distracting. That's a true statement. It can be engaging too, and it can be distracting. So that's why I want you to be mindful of how you're using it. Okay. I can't teach and look at the chat window at the same time. That would be very hard to do. So in that sense, it's distracting to me. And I have to look at the chat window because, I have to read your questions. Again, I want to encourage you to use the chat window. I just want you to be, mindful and ask questions. But again, maybe you can raise your hand too. And if you think that the question, if you're not sure whether it's a good question or not, you can raise your hand and I can say, you can ask your question and you can write your question in the chat. For example, here's something that we can do. Maybe you can write your question in the chat window and then raise your hand. And then when I say Jesse or Anthony, go ahead, and you would kind of send your message. And then we can read it together and we can discuss it. We can try that. We can try different things. Okay, guys. All right. So we're doing kind of new stuff together. So let's kind of be, let's try to be respectful. I want to be respectful of kind of what you guys are doing. And let's try to kind of run this class in a very kind of effective way. Okay, so notice here that when I created this project, it created this file main.py, and I can write Python code here. But notice that it also created a folder called venv, and this is my virtual environment. So inside my venv, there is Ben, and Ben contains actually the Python interpreter and a few other things. And there's also something called lib, which actually contains the packages that that we have, and maybe more packages that we can install later. And the way PyCharm does it is actually how I like to do it. I like my virtual environment to be next to my Python project, kind of my Python files. It doesn't have to be like that, by the way. For example, Anaconda, which is something maybe that you've heard of, doesn't do it like this. It actually has a folder that puts all the virtual environments in, and then it connects the virtual environments to your Python files. I don't like that. I prefer for my virtual environment to be next to my file. For me, I like it like this, and that's how I like it. It's just it's a preference. You can have it like this, or you can have it differently. That's fine. But if you use PyCharm, by default, it'll put the virtual environment next to the file. So now, if I hit play, do you guys see this play here, this play button? If I hit play, it'll execute the Python file here using this virtual environment. So it'll make the connection automatically because I created the project using using PyCharm, excuse me. So with PyCharm, it knows that when you click play, it'll actually use this virtual environment and it'll execute the code. So here, for example, I can say print hello world. And if I hit play, it'll execute this code using, again, the Python interpreter that is stored in this virtual environment. So this is good stuff, I don't want to spend kind of too much. I want to just, every week, I want to introduce you to an idea in Python so that, again, when we start coding in Python, you know all of that stuff. So if you hit play, you can see that it prints hello world. Is that good, guys? Do you have any questions? All right. So let me do just a few things here in Python. And then after, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, we can take a break. And then we would be done with Python. So after the break, we're actually gonna, connect to a remote database using PyCharm, not so much Python, but PyCharm. And we'll start kind of doing stuff, kind of database stuff, hopefully. We'll just introduce databases and we'll continue to do that. Blake, I can see your hand raised. What's your question, Blake? Again, you can use the mic or you can use the chat. What's your question? Okay, so another thing that I should say is, so I did say that maybe it would be a good idea to write your question first so that when I say, for example, go ahead, you can just to kind of save a little bit of time. Okay, I know it's a lot of things. I'm being kind of very particular here, but, let's just build a good system. Okay, so Blake is saying, I have PyCharm up, but it says I have no interpreter. How do I get one? Okay, so that's actually, I'm assuming you have Windows, or do you have Mac? Windows. Yeah, so in that case, you want to actually download Python and you want to connect PyCharm to Python. So you can try to Google, that'll take a little bit of time. But if you have Mac, actually, it's much easier because you'll have Python. But if you have Windows, most likely you do have Python, but maybe you don't have kind of a specific version of Python, and maybe PyCharm doesn't know where your Python is. So try to Google a few things. And if you have questions, maybe that's going to be kind of a one-to-one session that we can do. So you can use my kind of office hours, or you can send me an email. I'll try to tell you how to do that. Okay, so Jesse is saying, what version of Python should we have? Okay, so that's actually a good question. Python has many versions, and some of them are somewhat old. So the ones that are very common is 2.7, 2.6. These are very, very common. I mean, by common, I mean they've been used in many projects in the past, kind of worldwide. But there's also Python 3 point something, maybe 3.6. That's also pretty common. Now there's, I think, 4 now, which you don't need. For me, I don't actually like to use the latest and greatest, which is funny because I like to use the latest in other things. I mean, usually when I kind of install something, like let's say, for example, the Mac OS, when they come up with a new kind of operating system, I'm the first one to install it. like a kid, you know, I want to see kind of the latest operating system. When I buy things, sometimes I like to kind of buy the latest if I can, if it makes sense. But for packages, kind of Python, for packages and even Python interpreter, I actually don't like the latest. Usually the problems that could cause is not worth kind of getting the new one yet. So you want to wait a little bit. You know, people say you should wait for everything, but so that, you know, it's kind of stable. But really, when it comes to Python interpreter, it's really good to wait a little bit, because it'll make your life very difficult if you get something very new that doesn't have packages for some things. So the best thing would be to wait. I would suggest maybe 3.6 or 3.7. So that's what I recommend. Okay, that's a long answer to a short question. Okay. Is that good? I think in class, I will use 3.6 or 3.7. We can talk about that. We can, of course, see this virtual environment, which version it is. I can show you how you can do that later. Let's do that later. For now, even if you get Python 4 just to practice, or Python 2 point something just to practice, it'll be perfectly fine. Okay, other questions. Blake, do you still have a question, or did you forget to kind of lower your hand? Okay, so Luai, you have a question.
So I just wanted to ask, so for another class, we had to install Python, and I have the 3.9 version. Is that fine, or should I get like something else for this class?
It's fine for now. I wanna, you know, before we cover stuff, I may wanna kind of look into them and see which one is the best one. You can, of course, always install Python 3.7. You can have all the Pythons in your computer. There's not going to be any kind of conflict. They do not conflict with each other. Of course, you can have a different virtual environment for each, you know, project, and each virtual environment can have a different kind of Python version. That's perfectly fine. So to go back to our notes here, maybe in 2020 you installed Python, you know, 3.9, and you might have a virtual environment here for Python 3.9. So the interpreter is going to be Python 3.9. And for this one, maybe it'll be Python, because it's newer, maybe it's going to be Python 4. For this one, maybe it'll be Python 2.6. All of that is perfectly fine. So you can have as many Pythons as you want, as long as you're aware. So as long as you're aware, of course, which Python you're using for each project. You know, you do want to be aware. So when we create virtual environments, kind of more of that later, I will tell you, let's do 3.6 or 3.7. That's going to be a good kind of environment. Okay, that's great. Luai, you have another question, or did you not lower your hand?
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm just going to lower the hand now.
Perfect. All right. Okay, so that's kind of hello world. I'm going to hit play. You can see it printed hello world again. I didn't really do anything here. I want to show you how you can do a loop, and you know, I can answer your questions about loops, and then maybe we can end class and take a break, and then we can again come back and talk about databases. So here's how you do a loop in Python. Now this will be different to maybe most of you. If you haven't done Python, this will be a little bit different. First of all, before we talk about loops, actually, let me talk about lists. So you can create a list of things. For example, you can say numbers equals to, and you can create a list that contains numbers like this. Okay, so that's going to be a list. It has a length. The length is 4. It has elements. Those elements have data types, and the data types of those elements is going to be integers. Of course, you can print that list. It's not an interesting list, but let's just print it. And you can see it prints, you know, 10, 11, 0, 30. Okay. You can create other data types. For example, you can say age is equal to 20. That's going to be kind of an integer for a variable with the name age. I didn't specify the data type like this. I don't have to. Actually, I can't in Python. I can't do that. I would just say age equals to 20. So you see how easy it is? Then I can say maybe name equals to Ben. it's pretty easy, right? I don't have to say string or anything else or integer. I can just do that. Now let's go back to this list. I'm going to take this list and let me take those two lines and put them actually here. Of course, you can print age, right? I mean, you can print age, that'll print 20. You can print name here. So as you can see here, I'm kind of going somewhat fast, but I do expect you to know Java. That's a prerequisite to this course. So you kind of know coding, you know variables, you know kind of printing. You can kind of guess what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of creating variables here, printing them, creating another variable, printing, creating a list and printing. So if I hit play, you'll see it'll print everything here. Is that good, guys? Do give me a reaction here before we talk about the loops. Okay, I see a question. Blake, you have a question? Okay. So Blake is saying you don't have to declare the variable type. No, you don't. You don't have to specify the data type. There is a data type, but you don't specify it. Python specifies it. So there is one. Those variables have data types, but you don't have to kind of worry about that. It does it for you. Anthony, what's your question?
Yeah, real quick. I was trying to add a comment in it. In Java, you just do two slashes, but it didn't seem to be working. How would I add a comment in here?
In Python, you would do this. What do you call this? Like a hash or pound?
Sure, yeah, pound hash.
You can. I think one of them is more correct. I mean, in terms of naming, I think if you look at the history of naming, I think one of them, it should be either hash or pound.
Okay.
But yeah, that's good, Anthony. That's a very good question. You can say this is our first program. That's good.
You just need one, or you have three? It's just three.
No, you just need actually one.
Okay.
But by convention, you do this. So the next line will have a single hash.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. So let me see. There's another question by Asim. Is number an array? This one is an array. Correct. Numbers is an array. Now in Python, we don't. I actually don't care, but some people don't like to call it arrays. They call it list, but it's an array. For me, array or list, it's the same thing. I can see Benjamin is saying it's a list. So it's for me, list or array, it's fine. Let's see. So someone is asking, does that mean that it can hold different data types? Yes. So actually this, again, we can call it list or array. It can have different data types, which actually you cannot do easily in other languages. For example, I can come here and I can say 1.5. So 1.5 is a float, and this one is an integer. And I can have a collection. Again, it's either a list or array that contains many elements that have different data types. That's nice, right? That's convenient. That's good. I mean, we like that. Of course, you can have other things. You can have kind of a Boolean value like false. You can have another list inside a list. You can have a character. You can have a string. You can have any data type. But I don't want to do that. I just want to create an array or a list of integers for now. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay, yeah, it's nice. It's convenient. Now, of course, if I was teaching Python, I would tell you how that is possible, because some of you may say, wait a second, how is that possible? Array, the size of the elements should be the same so that we can access them directly. They're stored contiguously and all of that kind of good stuff. But we're not, this is not a course about Python, so I don't really want to elaborate too much about kind of how it works behind the scenes. If you have questions, you can ask me. If I think that your question is a good question, I'll try to answer it. If not, I'll tell you, maybe we can do that kind of offline. Okay. So I'm going to hit play again, and you can see that it actually did all of that. And that's good, right? This is what we expect. Now, let's say I want to loop through those elements. And typically when you loop, a lot of the times you actually loop through elements. sometimes you just loop through kind of numbers, you iterate from 0 to 10, but sometimes you loop through elements. That's actually a pretty somewhat common thing to do. And the way to do that in Python, it looks like this. Now, again, it kind of doesn't look scary, but it looks very different. It looks like this: for, and then you say element. Now, element could be anything, and people usually use L, but you can say num, you can say anything you want. Let's just use L, which stands for element. And then you say N, and you say numbers. And then you have a colon, and then you hit new line, and that takes you to the new line. And right now you can print L if you want. So when you do this, when you say for L in this list, essentially you're going to loop through this list one element at a time. And each time the value L, or the value of L, will be one of those elements. So in the first iteration, L will actually be 10. In the second iteration, L will be 11, then 0, then 30. So we can do that. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to hit play. I don't actually have to save. It'll save automatically before you hit play. So do you guys see what happened? It actually printed 10, 11, 0, 30. So Alan is saying, is this the syntax for a for loop? Yes, this is the syntax for a loop in Python. Typically, maybe we do have other loops. I have to think now. This is really the loop. Of course, we have a while loop, but for the for loop, this is pretty much what we do. We kind of have a list, and we do something that looks like this. Now, let's say you want to loop through numbers from 1 to 100. Now, of course, you don't want to create a list from 1 to 100. That'll take, at least doing it manually will take time. So the way you would do it, let me just print stars here, just to kind of create a separation between kind of this and what I'm about to do. And here I'm going to say for L, I can use L again, that's fine. N, and I would use range. So the folks that have seen Python, they probably have seen range. Range is extremely common, and it's used kind of all the time. And you would say from 0 to 100 like this, and you have a colon, and then you can say print L. So this, what you're seeing here, range from 0 to 100, you can think of this as a list of numbers from 0 to 99. So 100 is not included. So again, let me repeat what I said. This range from 0 to 100, you can think of it as the list of numbers from 0 to 99. And of course, if you have a list of numbers from 0 to 99, that's what's going to be printed. Because again, we saw that if you have a list that is placed here, this loop is going to actually print the elements. And if we think of this as a list from 0 to 99, then essentially it's going to print from 0 to 99. Very simple. Is that good, guys? I don't want to say very simple. Maybe it's not. I would say just simple. It's not maybe, for the students that haven't done Python before, maybe it kind of looks different, but hopefully it makes sense. Yeah, I want it to make sense. I'm happier with makes sense than easy or obvious. It doesn't have to be obvious, but if it makes sense, that's good. It can become obvious with time. Now, this 0 is actually by default, so you don't have to specify the 0. You can get rid of it. You can just specify one number, like 100. And if you do that, it'll start from 0 to 99. So same thing. So you actually rarely see this, because by default, if you specify one number, like 100, it'll go from 0 to 100, excluding the 100. So it'll be from 0 to 99, really. You can see here, it's going from 0 to 99. If we scroll up, it'll start from 0 here. Do you guys have any questions about any of this? Any questions?
I have a quick question.
All right, Anthony.
So would you 0 is only the default, but if you only wanted the range of 50 to 100, then obviously you'd have to put that in.
That's good. So Anthony's saying, so maybe we see something that looks like this, and the answer is yes. And you see that, and this will go from 50 to, again, 99.
Okay.
So that's great. Let's test that. You can see that it'll actually start at 50. You see, guys? You see that, right? Okay. Luai, you have a question?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say if you could scroll up real quick.
Like here. Let me make it smaller. Can you still see that? I can make this
Yeah.
big.
I don't really have um, a question. It was just when I tried to run it myself, it kind of gave a error message. But I think if I look back at the lecture, maybe I'll be able to like catch it on my own or something. Um, Probably like a basic issue or something.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna take a break now. If you want to kind of do that in the break, or if you want to do it after class, then reach out. That's perfectly fine. So someone is asking, how do we change and increase increments it? How do we change the increments it increases by? So that's a good question. So right now the increments are 1. So we're going kind of by ones. If you want to change the increment, this is called the step, or we can call it increment. And that would be the third value. So if you specify a third value, maybe like 2, then we're going to be incrementing by 2s. So it'll start at 50 and it'll go by 2. So 50, 52, like this. So let me do that. Do you guys see this? 50, 52, 54. And of course, again, 100 will never be printed. So 100 is not included. So that will not be printed. This one will be printed. We always start here, we end here, but again, it's excluding this one. Yeah, so Austin is saying, indenting is, I haven't talked about indenting, and you're right. I think indenting can make things very confusing. So in Java, we do it like this. We say kind of for int I equals to 0, I is less than maybe 5 I plus plus, something that looks like this. And then we have those curly braces. Now, those curly braces are actually not needed in Java if you have just one line, but typically you have more than one lines, right? You have, say, line 1, line 2, and in that case, you have to have those curly braces. And those define kind of the beginning and the end of a block. Usually they call this a block. In Python, you don't have curly braces, you have the indentation. So if you want to print another thing, maybe print hello. And if you want to say that I want this to be in the same block as this one, which is the loop body, then you have to indent it. So anything that's, the same indentation is going to be the same block. And, we can talk about that more because maybe it seems confusing. It's actually not confusing. It's actually beautiful. I mean, this is a beautiful thing about Python because the readability of code is much higher than Java. Because in Java, you can write code like this. You can. There's nothing really preventing you from this. And at that point, it becomes very hard to read. Seeing the indentation is actually better, in my opinion, in terms of kind of, again, readability. So if you want, again, if you want your loop body to be more than one line, you just simply indent it and write something. And if you want to go outside the loop, you just kind of go the other, so remove the indentation. So say, for example, print, this is not part of the loop. And if you hit play, it becomes kind of obvious that this is not part of the loop, was only printed once. So it wasn't part of the loop. However, hello was part of the loop because it was printed. So yeah, these are very good comments, good questions. And we'll see more of this. So what I want you to do, guys, is after, this class, and before, next week, of course, we're going to have a quiz next week. I want you to practice the stuff. So the stuff that I explained, you want to kind of practice them. You might want to Google a few things. You're going to be quizzed on that stuff, but it's important to practice it so that, again, when the time comes, when we want to kind of talk more about Python, you have kind of the foundations, you have the basics, and you're not going to be stumbling around. Is that good, guys? Do you have any questions? We can take a break now. Marcus, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question about, kind of just doing the extra studying, going back over the topics we were, I guess, just talking about. Do you have like a list of things that we should just, is it possible to make like a list or go find somewhere to look that we're supposed to like know, like kind of like a sheet, like things you should know, things you should be making sure we're like taking a look at.
Well, the things that you should know are the things that we cover, and you don't need to know more than that. So I'm going to try to cover everything. And what you can do, or what maybe I can do, is just tell you what we covered. I mean, just say, for example, for loops. I don't want to, again, provide elaborate notes. I may kind of say, this is what we covered. We talked about virtual environments. We talked about loops. We talked about, lists, and that's it. And of course, you can look at the videos again. You can read more stuff on your own. And when it comes to quizzes and exams, I'll be asking you about the stuff that we covered only. So I'm not going to expect you to know more Python than what we covered.
Okay.
And as you can see, there are a lot of courses. Benjamin posted a course. You can do that. Why not? It's good to learn Python, and we will need it again to connect to databases. So why not? You can take a course if you have time. If you don't want to, that's fine, as long as you understand everything that we're doing. Let's see. So that's Marcus. Someone is asking, can you explain again the last for loop? So this is the for loop that I was talking about. And this is the beginning, this is the end, and this is the step. So essentially this loop is going to iterate from 50 to 100, but we're going to be adding 2s each time. So it'll be 50, 52. And if your loop is more than one line, which in this case it is, you want to indent all of that. So let's say it's 3 lines, you want to indent that. So you want to say, something here. So you can have, as many lines as you want. And for you to tell Python that this is part of the loop, or essentially the loop body, you want to make sure that you indent everything here. And when you want to quit the loop, when you want to be outside the loop, you want to kind of go back. You want to remove the indentation. So this is not part of the loop. So this will not loop, as many times as we loop here. And of course, sometimes you may not want to use L. So you don't have to use L. Let's say you want to print hello 50 times. Let's go to increment 1 here, which is really the default. If you want to print hello 50 times, you can just do this, and it'll print hello 50 times. So you don't have to use L. L, you can just have it. You can use it. You do want to have something here. Some people do another syntax, which I don't want to talk about because I really don't like. But the best thing would be to actually do something that looks like this, L, and you can use it. You don't have to use it. That's perfectly fine. If you hit play, of course, it's going to print hello 50 times, from 50 to 100. Okay, so let's see. Luai, you have a question?
As far as preparing for the quiz for next week, and as far as the Python that we'll have to know, it would just be what we did in this lecture. So the for loops, some of the syntax. I guess I'll just get to it. So like, if we go through we rewatch the lectures and take notes through it, and like maybe like whatever else that you put on Canvas, like the last time, then we'll be okay for the next quiz.
Yes, you should be okay. And the best thing to do would be to maybe write some notes during class so that you don't have to kind of rewatch. But again, we're going to have small chunks, so that'll help, hopefully. Let's say you want to rewatch one thing, you can just rewatch that part. So yes, but watching the videos, understanding what I'm doing here should be enough. These are this is the material that you're responsible for kind of understanding and learning. It's the videos. Okay, so that's good. Anthony, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was playing around with the range for loop, and I have the first number larger than the other number, so I have the range 100, 2, and it works, but the output is some weird sequence of numbers, and I'm not quite sure what's happening there.
So you had let's actually do that. We should take a break very soon, but let's do that quickly. So what did you have, Anthony? Let's do your example.
I had 100 and then 2.
2, and how about here?
Nothing.
Oh, like this?
Yes. And surprisingly, it worked, but the output is strange.
You're right. Surprisingly, it worked. I feel like it wouldn't work. I haven't taught Python as a course in a while, but let's try. Nothing happened here. So maybe it's another loop.
The 10,
So-
11, 0, 30.
This is
no.
from here. Yeah, that's from here.
Oh, my mistake.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. Another question, how do we make for loops with floats and doubles? I guess, I don't know, what does that mean? Loops, I guess, do you want to go from, say, 50 to 100, but you want to go by halves, maybe? Is that what you want? You can do this. You can do that. That should work. So, right, it'll be 50, 50 and a half. Should work. I haven't done that in a while, but actually it doesn't work. So I apologize. I thought it would work. And we can make it work, but it has to be a different syntax. I have many kind of ideas on how to make it work, but we don't have to talk about that now. So that's good. I thought that this kind of would work, but this has to be an integer, so it doesn't work. That's good. These are good questions. Any other? Anthony, do you want to ask something, or do you want? Okay, perfect. Okay, guys, so let's take a break. Let's take a 15-minute break, and we'll be back around 1:13, and we'll talk until 2. So we'll talk for 45 minutes, and then we'll end class then. Okay, guys, no more Python stuff. So before we end kind of this recording, do you have any questions about Python? Do you think everything was good? Give me a reaction. Was that good? Did you like the stuff we covered? Okay, so it seems that I don't see any kind of X's or sad faces. Do we have sad faces as a reaction? I'm not sure. But okay, so some of you are liking Python. That's good. Lua, you have a question?
Just one more thing. So with regards to Python, the main thing we're going to be using it in this course is we're not going to be like fully learning Python, but we're going to be using it to just connect to databases. That's what you said the purpose of it is, right?
Yes, but we will be really using Python to connect to the database. You know, when you connect to the database, we're going to use something called object relational mapper, and the idea is to use Python syntax to interact with the database. So we will be using it, but we're not going to be using it extensively. I mean, it'll be, you know, it'll be basics. You know, it'll still be basics, even though we're going to talk about functions and loops and things like that. That's still basics. Okay, guys. So I'm gonna come back after 15 minutes. So at 1:15, we'll resume.